Yes, it is time. The recording has started. So we only have two questions. After we answer them, we can open the floor to the current two participants of this meeting who are not officers. So I'm gonna start out with the first question, which is, what is one of the most essential social abilities you need to have to succeed in the industry? And then they have a second question of, do recruiters look for more personal works or more story-based works? Does anyone want to start, or do you want me to start? Okay, I'll take that as an I'll start. One of the essential social abilities of kind of getting into the industry is honestly baseline networking. You know, getting people to know you, your art, and keeping that connection alive, because the more connections you have, the more chances you have of people coming and being like, hey, I know your art, we want to hire you for that reason. And so being able to kind of worm your way into people's DMs or talk to them in person, and then follow up afterwards is really helpful. And then making sure you're not really like using that person, make sure it's a really healthy kind of natural organic connection to the person you're trying to talk to, because a lot of people can kind of just tell if you're only using them for information, and that's not how you want your interactions with that person to feel if you are planning on keeping in contact for the long run. Uh, does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I would add just to oh, go on, Claire.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, are they asking about personality wise, or is there any
Um,
specifics in that question?
so for the first question of this, it's just essential social abilities to succeed in the industry for this one.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Maggie, you can go. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, baseline friendliness, along with connecting and networking, just being able to laugh and find things in common with the peers around you, because it can lead to just good peer employee skills, like working with your coworkers and bosses. So I think that's pretty important to keep in mind.
I agree. Uh, Peers are actually one of the easiest, like, quote unquote, industry connections you can get, because, I mean, we're all here suffering together, and we all, generally understand or know each other's work because we spend at least 10 weeks to anywhere from every single class or up to every single class with that person. So you get a really in-depth working knowledge of how this person works, what their style looks like, how do they generally feel. So a lot of kind of break-in jobs students get are because they keep up with those connections from school.
Yeah, and I'm only in SAS right now because Claire kind of helped me get through the door. So, yeah, connections, really big.
It's a weird thought.
Slay!
Yeah, it's definitely a weird thought because I'm also in SAS because I was a Nepo baby, and as bad as that sounds, a lot of jobs are taking a chance just by hiring someone that nobody knows and knows how they work. So that's actually a really big risk to companies, and they're just kind of hoping and praying that you're able to deliver on what they're asking for. Does
I will
anyone?
I'm also a
say,
Nepo baby.
could I add on to the hiring other students?
Yes.
Um, you have to keep in mind though that you need to show those traits that are hireable and have that person who's actually giving you the chance to basically have a lot of faith in you. They're giving you a position in a role where if you fail, you'll make the person look bad as well. So, yeah, I'm just gonna put that out there because stuff.
Do you have something to add, Pia?
I just said I'm also a Nepo baby.
Oh
I feel
yeah,
like all of us here is a Nepo baby.
yeah. Um, I thought of something when Claire was talking about Nepo baby and putting their name on the line. But I completely forgot about that. So, oh, a nepo baby. So it's nepo baby is like officer slang term for nepotism baby, and nepotism is that practice of hiring. So like if you're a CEO and you have a son, then you hire your son into that company because they're your son or because you know them. Uh, there's probably more to it than that, but that's like the basic definition of nepotism is just hiring. I think it's specifically tied to familial ties, but I mean, we're all kind of like a great big scat family, so it's like we're all kind of nepo babies to each other.
Yeah, and it's good to remember that when people talk about nepo babies, especially in terms of like joking around and celebrities, it's in roles that I don't want to say there's not a lot of teamwork, but it's usually one person trying to get one role. But most likely, when we're all in industry, we're going to be working in team scenarios. So it needs to be able to prove that you can trust your superior and like someone trusts you enough to bring you up with them. It's like a different scenario almost.
I will also say, I guess maybe not a social ability, but just like kind of the ability of have have your work out in the world in a portfolio because I probably would have. I mean, it depends because there is like different forms of nepotism because I also got into Submersed because my friend was like, "Oh, hey, they need people." And then I was like, "Oh, hey, sign me up." And then like they didn't even interview me, but they were also like SCAD students. So this kind of changes depending on the beast of production that you're going into. Some companies are fine just hiring people they may not know, or like hire via word of mouth based on someone else they know. But it it depends for art. It's a through line I'm kind of finding, especially as my friends are getting hired or not finding jobs because they haven't been hired. So that's a big thing. Uh, there is kind of another question that touches on this, so I'm gonna move on to the next one. So the next one is, do recruiters look for personal works or more story-based works? And I'm gonna say this is kind of the same thing because if it's a personal work that you really care about and you're really, you know, interested by and you're super into it and you have this energy, this positive energy associated with it, you're probably gonna put a lot more work and love into that piece versus like, oh, I just have to finish this for a class. And that's gonna show to other artists and recruiters and people who look at your artwork. And they can generally tell if you're into it. Story-based work is super important, especially now in the face of AI. I am opening this can of worms. I apologize because AI only does the baseline. It can't think. It doesn't understand why this cat is here or why this painting has a bloody smudge on it. It just sees, oh, painting. Okay, I'm gonna put that there. That's why it messes up hands and text so bad, is because it doesn't understand these symbols and things that we understand on the abstract level. We understand them. So by pushing your work to have more story in it in a way that's not that super surface level way and has further storytelling that adds to sort of that scene you're making, that makes you more hireable because it shows you understand storytelling. It shows you're able to sell this idea really quickly and easily to a viewer, and it's not something easily created by an AI.
Also, that question is low key like there's no fine answer. Recruiters, they look for different things for different companies and they have personal like opinions for what you should share in your portfolio. Some people like that you have like your sketchbook in there to show like your figure drawings, but then other people are like completely cut out any of that stuff and just show finalized stuff. So it's kind of difficult to answer that question with a solid like response. So kind of just use your discretion. Um, I feel like sometimes personal work does really well, except make sure that it's the best of the best and curate your portfolio to be the best that it could be.
Anyone else? Also to kind of bounce off of that, touching on the like, there is no right answer to this. I mean, obviously, have correct spelling, and generally for portfolio work, make sure you have a clear understanding of foundational principles because art directors immediately know if you're not, foundationally sound because, they look at hundreds of thousands of portfolios throughout a year and they're an art director because they already understand those kind of base things to make a piece work. Um, so there's those two things. And also, like, maybe a third helpful tip is if you're like gunning for a certain position at a certain company, look at the portfolios of people from that company. Look at what sort of maybe got them hired because usually after an artist gets hired, they don't really update their sites or resume unless they're looking for another job. So that's kind of a good touch point to kind of figure out what this company is gearing towards or what catches their eye. And you can even connect like with a recruiter or maybe even with an art director of that project you're interested in. And I mean, they may respond, they might not respond, but getting that kind of open line of connection and showing kind of that interest of, oh, hey, how do you do this or that, can also be a good foot in the door to getting in contact with that job maybe down the line.
And to touch on the point you said about, oh, my thing is echoing. Hang on. Is it still echoing? Okay, we're good. To touch on the point about the spelling and stuff, really make like double check everything like that, like just presentation and spelling. Because one of my professors, he was telling me about how he would go through portfolios and the first minor mistake he would see, he would just throw the portfolio away and move on to the next one. So like even though when like spelling, obviously we're not going to be right. Well, you might be, but like just really make sure you don't mess up on the small things because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot and you don't want that to compromise the rest of your portfolio.
Also, some companies look for a specific style. If you have a style that they think has like a spark, or it's like close enough to what they're already working with, they're more inclined to probably look at your other work as well. And with what Tessa said about looking at other people who got hired, I would be a little cautious about which people you look at their portfolio for. There's some people who have been in the industry for like a longer period of time, and so obviously their work is at a different level than yours. So just being aware of which ones to look out for and which ones are like they're going way above and beyond and they've had years of experience before you.
Also, along that kind of line, when you look at people's portfolios and ArtStation and stuff like that, keep in mind there's nothing really on those saying how much time they took. Like for example, I believe for Irie Pan's projects, she takes 6 months to do those world building projects, and the first like 2 to 4 weeks are just done in research. And also with like ArtStation, you're only seeing the finished product. You're not seeing how that artist thinks. You're not seeing, kind of the behind the curtain decisions they're making or things they're pulling out. So it's a little bit deceptive also with how people are presenting things that you need to be aware of when looking at other portfolios and work in that aspect.
And like keeping in mind, like in that sense, how you perceive other portfolios can kind of help, I think, in getting in the mind of people perceiving yours. Because the same way you're digging through someone's portfolio to try to figure out their process, their story, someone could be doing the very same to you, a recruiter. And so kind of having that mindset can help you tailor down to the very best pieces.
Also, big emphasis on navigation. Please make it easy to navigate. And yeah,
So to kind of move on from that, the next question we have, I'm actually gonna have to pull up a DM I have with Nala, because I personally know next to nothing about tabletop role-playing games and sort of the production process that they go through, because they speak a very different language than, say, like game biz dev or animation biz dev, because the product is so different from games and animation generally. So the question is, What is concept art for tabletop games like? If you know, is the job ideating designs that appear in final illustrations, or so it's kind of like an interesting question. So I talked to Nala. This answers your third question. Are there any alums or people you know who work in tabletop games or tabletop RPGs looking for connections? The only one that I am familiar with and actually on like speaking terms with, because I don't really know any other TTRPG people, is Nala. Another person who may know some people is Ryo Yu Chen. He's usually around in the alumni phantom section. He's open to talking to students. I believe Nala is open to talking to students. They are super busy though, so sometimes it takes them a little bit to respond. But to go back to that first question, it depends on the studio, is what they told me. So usually, so to kind of quote them word for word, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure myself given I don't work on these larger books or teams where they do hire separate concept artists. But if I had to wager a guess, for example, Wizards of the Coast, the concept artists are in-house talent that work with art directors, and the rest of the team uh, ideates everything from character, creature, weapons, anything that they need concepted. And then from there, the art directors take the concept art and then they outsource that to illustrators who make those final finished illustrations based on those concepts. This changes a little bit if you're looking at kind of Wizards of the Coast card game versus say like maybe Lorcana. Uh, they also say they mentioned that they've personally hired concept artists for spot art and books. It's different application of talent. They're paying concept artists $25 to $50 per concept, and then they get a whole bunch of concepts from that that will go into a finished book with those spot arts. Um, they mentioned usually concept art doesn't get seen in the final product, but I found that developing on the project, hiring a concept artist whose skill definitely is stacked higher in the creativity and ideation department. Not that interior illustrators aren't good at concepting, but at least they know a concept artist specializes in ideation is generally the right move. Uh, they also mentioned that larger companies, again referencing Wizards of the Coast, have or are more likely to have in-house concept artists and freelance illustrators that they'll pull on. Some of them will have kind of this Rolodeck or like specific amount of artists that they'll continue to call on repeatedly. Maybe not necessarily for concept, but because they're familiar with how they work and what that sort of looks like, they'll pull those people because they know they can hit that job. Um, they also mentioned, I'm assuming this is another company, Hunters Entertainment prefers to use in-house talent or people with direct recommendations. So again, like kind of touching on that, Nepo babies. Do you guys have anything to add on that? It's kind of like super specific question. I will take that as a no. That's from Nala's point of view. I'm sure there's a bunch of other sort of maybe more indie or larger companies. They all probably look for different things and have different spreads of what they're looking for. Uh, I know an important point that SCAD doesn't always generally touch on is if you are looking for a tabletop role playing game work, make sure you're tailoring your portfolios and your work towards what is this final product going to look like. Are you looking to do like Magic the Gathering splash arts, for the little tile on top or the full spread images? In that case, make sure you're kind of to the level of those cards being produced because Wizard of the Coast is super choosy. Um, you know, look at what the end product is of that place you're wanting to go and make sure your portfolio looks like or hits areas that maybe overlap with that product you're going for. Because a D&D book is going to look very different from a Lorcana card game. um, next, because that's so specific, I'm gonna move into something maybe some other officers can help answer. The next question is best practices for trying to ask industry professionals to give you a portfolio review. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It depends on if you're in person or online, because there's a lot of kind of different ways to approach this.
I think there's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn also. I follow a lot of recruiters and they post like tips and tricks about like reaching out to them. I can't remember which one, but they recommended like not just jumping into a conversation asking for a portfolio review necessarily online. Um, but yeah, I would also just recommend following recruiters on LinkedIn about recruiter like questions in general.
I will. Oh,
Another option. Oh, go on.
no, no, go ahead.
I was going to say another option for online is if you spot industry professional in just like something you're interested in, like let's say you're both interested in the same book series and you both are producing like fan art for it at the same time, you might become aware of each other and then that could be a cause for discussion. So I'm in a scenario where like this girl and I've been following each other for years and I'm like, oh, wait, you are a concept artist because we have this in common and there's this years of silent mutual rapport, I could potentially go and ask you. It's just like finding those things in common. And the way to do that online is finding legit like fandoms you have in common.
I think that's actually like a super kind of. It's like a silent thing Scott doesn't talk about unless you have Casey Nelson for illustration. She talks about it all the time. But finding a similar through line of like, oh, you like cookies? I like cookies. Or like, oh my gosh, you do MLP art. Oh, I love MLP art. Like, let's talk about that. That's a good way to get your foot in the door. I mean, you can always cold contact and be like, hey, you know, hello person, I love your work on this, or like ask them a question, just be like, do you mind like looking at my portfolio? There's a lot of ways to kind of cold connect that. I personally hate cold connecting like that because I feel like it gives that sense of like, oh, I only want to use you for your information. To me, there's nothing wrong with it. I've known a bunch of people who've done it. But like Maggie said, finding kind of a way to build that rapport with that person, build that relationship, and then maybe hit them with the question once you're a little bit more comfortable. Uh, this does change a lot for sort of in-person things, so like Lightbox, GDC, just like general conventions where you're in a place with like-minded people. Some of them will just randomly be like, "Oh hi, how you doing? How you like the conference? Do you want a portfolio review?" Because I had that happen to me at Lightbox when I was like completely freaking out, didn't know where all the tables. I was like, "Yeah, I'll go to these tables." Walked in, didn't know the orientation of the map, and immediately got lost. And then like missed all the meetings I wanted to go for, and it was a whole mess. But just kind of, I guess, like looking like you don't know what's happening can maybe help a little bit, because like Lightbox is such a big event. There's so many artists there, and there's so many like massive big name artists there. It's understandable if you're like freaked out a little bit, but there are definitely some artists there who are like, "Oh hi, how you doing? Let's talk a little bit." Another way to sort of approach that in person is you can kind of finesse people into portfolio reviews if you really want, or ask some more directed questions. Um, if you're taking up a bunch of their time, I would recommend maybe buying something from them, because you are taking up so much of their time and it shows you support them. Uh, you can also just ask them like very specific questions about decisions you see them making in specific pieces. Um, or like if you have an answer to maybe a problem that they're having, because like another Lightbox example from me is there's this artist. I'd have to look up what his name was again, but he was making this sort of, he was rigging and animating and modeling these characters in Blender. And I said, oh hey, I have you heard about this thing that's used for texture projection? It might help you with your process in making these characters because you're already hand painting the textures on their models. So like here's this process I use. I threw out the kind of question of like, oh hey, would you like to see how I used it on a film I worked on? And he didn't really bite on that. I understand that because he had a lot of people at his table. But kind of just finding ways to kind of organically maybe push your portfolio may make people a little bit more receptive to that. Sorry, that was super long-winded.
And to
Okay,
add on
but
to that,
oh,
oh
go
wait,
on.
no, you go ahead. Okay. Just to emphasize a bit on the LinkedIn reach out chat thing, I think a CAS advisor came into class one time and they were like, definitely try and find out or like get to know on who you're reaching out first, because industry professional can range from someone that you don't really know and like a SCAD alum that maybe through that SCAD similarity you can like reach out better or like you're more comfortable in reaching out. But they recommended like try and figure out or try to get to know what they worked on or what their position is in the industry that you want in the company that you want to break into and what they like their works and stuff like that, and then chat them. And I remember Kaz advisor also said that another reason why she got hired in the first place is because she commented on like one of the person's work, like, hey, I like this work, I wonder if you want to talk about it. So like definitely stuff like that instead of like just, hey, can you look at my portfolio, which just feels like I think was it Tessa that said it, that felt like you're just using me to like get into the industry. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, you just got me thinking about one. So for business illustration, at least you have to do, or well, they're changing the classes, so I don't know if this is gonna stay, but they ask you to do a project near the end where you interview a artist who's an industry professional. So this isn't necessarily a recruiter, but it's still like great to have an artist's like point of view on your work. So you could format an email. I mean, you don't even have to like be in the class or anything, but you can just format an email, like have the subject question from a SCAD student and just ask if you could ask them some questions and potentially have like um ask them to check out your portfolio afterwards after that through like email, Zoom or whatever, and you can say it's for a quote unquote class. So it's more like you're having to do this assignment. And the worst that'll happen is just say they won't respond, honestly. But I was able to do it with like Carlos Ruz, who worked with like Riot, Disney Lorcana and stuff like that. So you don't know what will happen. It's a great opportunity and great like networking kind of thing. And I was able to ask him a lot of questions. So you can just I mean, you could just say, "Hey, I just have a lot of questions." On top of, could I potentially ask you to check out my portfolio and give me some feedback or advice on how we can make it better? So, yeah, there's sometimes opportunities within classes, but you could just do this on your own. Yay.
Kind of another thing you can do is, I know a good way to kind of get into contact with SCAD alums who are in the industry is talk to Cass. Because I remember mentioning back when, this is gonna show my SCAD age, but back when uh Roberson was a advisor, no one here actually probably knows him. He's actually now becoming a SCAD professor, but I mentioned I was like interested in concept art, and then I also was interested in painting because I have a illustration concept degree and a painting minor. And he was like, oh hey, I know this concept artist who also works in oil painting, maybe go talk to him. And a lot of artists have a pay it forward mindset as long as you're approaching them in a human way, uh, because a lot of them want to help students because they themselves know and understand and have been in the situation that we've been in. So a lot of them are actually pretty receptive to talking. And if they're not, I mean, the worst they're gonna say is no, generally. If they say anything worse than no, you maybe don't want to talk to that person.
Oh, also, you just reminded me. We have a lot of professors here. I would recommend looking outside of your major for people you could ask for a portfolio review with, because we have some professors who are still in the industry. Like Professor Standing for animation, he's the chair or he's not the chair, but he's the associate chair, and you can ask him for a portfolio review if he's at like during one of his office hours. Or you could also check out like Liz Richardson. She's an illustration professor and just recently is joining the Disney Lorcana team as an art director. You could also ask just like professors to do it because some of them are still in the industry and have like real time advice that they could give you. And some of them hold positions of like power in the industry as well and could maybe help with like even breaking through.
To kind of touch on that, actually, one of the animation guest speakers that they brought in, uh, like week 7 or something, week 6, her name was Allison Shribneck, and she actually got her break-in job into the industry because she maintained a connection with Zach Rich, I believe, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So also like keeping in contact with your professors, because the professors were all industry professionals at one time or another, or are still in the industry, and they can maybe put your portfolio in front of someone who can help you get a job. Because I know like when Atkins was at New York Comic Con, he was like recommending students to go here, go there, even drop the students' physical portfolio on another place's like table that where they're tabled at. And so kind of even just showing up at cons and being like, "Oh, hi professor, how you doing?" That can maybe get you headed in that direction as well. Um
With that, sorry. I just want to emphasize the other question answer of being hired by peers so much because there's some people who become recruiters or art directors here, and I just highly recommend that your quiet, um, is it called a quiet resume? I think it's called a quiet resume, but like your quiet resume is top notch. Like your quiet resume is basically just referring to how you act in a team setting, how you work under pressure, and what type of like level like personality that you bring out to other people. It's just like, of course, sometimes you won't like a classmate or something like that, but just be mindful that some of these people could potentially be people in charge of bringing on others from projects. Yeah.
I agree. Good point. Um so this one we already kind of answered, or I answered back when I was talking about Nala. This last question is: are there any alums or just people you know who work in tabletop games or tabletop RPGs looking for connections? Um, I'll throw out Nala, or yeah, Nala. They have the like sun icon. I think their Discord username is actually sun, unless they changed it when Discord migrated to the new weird like name only things. The other one again is Ryo Yu Chen. They have they have their logo as their icon. I don't really know how to explain it. It's red and white. He's usually active in the Discord, so he's pretty easy to find. At this point in time, I mean, I don't think we really know any other TTRPG people in the chat, or at least if they are here, they're not vocal about it. So at this point in time, I will open the floor to any questions for the two students in chat. I guess we could also just unmute them if they so desire, if they want to be freed from the club meeting prison.
Yeah, I say unmute.
Okay, I'll free you. Oh, also for people who haven't unmuted people before, if you wanna unmute someone from like the server club meeting mute thing, uh, right click their name, click the server mute, and it'll be like angry red server mute, and then just unclick it, and then they should be able to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so I guess question wise, I actually literally today just filled out a prerequisite waiver for 450 for the summertime. So I guess it was just my question is what exactly does that class entail? If any of you guys have taken it or heard of it?
So 450. before it gets scrubbed, it kind of depends on who your professor is, but generally what you do is you do like at least your logo. Some have you do like business invoices and more legal documents. Uh, Generally you look into what it would take to get a, I believe, sole proprietor or LLC license in the state you're interested in. It's been a hot minute. Uh,
I'm in it right now. I can answer it a little bit better. I have Professor Wimmer. We're like doing our task stuff, knowing exactly what to charge for like an illustrator's thing, except it's the only downside with Wimmer's class is that he doesn't know a lot about other positions that people would have. For example, I want to go into visual development, but so a lot of the illustrator stuff doesn't necessarily apply to me, but it's still good to know. Um, he does what to charge. He does branding boards, so you'll make an entire like you'll make your whole brand basically of who you are, and you'll put it down on a board, just like laying it out. So you'll have all the necessities like your color, your colors that you'll have, what type of font face, business cards, anything like that. And then that's the class where you do the interview with for like an industry professional. Um, is there anything else? I think that's it. It's not necessary. It's there's like no real, um, there's no real art stuff involved. It's very heavily like taxes and things like that. But it helps with like knowing how to not get lowballed and protecting your art pieces. There's like copyright stuff that he teaches, and he has a really good book or like textbook he has. Yeah, it's a lecture. But he has a very good textbook that he goes through. I would highly recommend buying it actually. It's like the only textbook I would recommend buying. Um, because it'll help you in the long run, especially if you need to look up stuff regarding like commission work, client work, and things like that. He also tells you how to kind of start and end an email professionally with an actual client. What Tessa said with logos, and I think that's it. Oh, and building your website, your portfolio website. So, yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you. Because I also am trying to go into visual development as well. And then the professor I'm supposed to have is annual powers.
I got no clue who that is.
he,
I don't know.
I think this is his first time teaching that class, so it might be a little bit rough.
I wish myself luck though.
I had a thought and then it like completely like disappeared from my brain for some reason. Yeah, it went in one brain cell and out the next brain cell completely. Oh my god.
I guess I'll just ask like other stuff. I don't know. I know that there's like, oh, okay. So I know that illustration and like Sequa and all that can do extra help. I'm assuming that's not happening for capstones next year.
That is a thing that's being trickled down. We do not have clear answers on it, and I don't assume animation's gonna have that clear answer until it's closer to fall because they are currently experiencing a lot of student backlash. They have reneged the 7-person limit. I think it's gone up to 10 again, like it used to be. It's just something you're gonna have to sit and wait on.
I would actually recommend reaching out to people right now. They, for right now, at least can't have any extra help. However, the quarter hasn't started for that. So, what you work on during the summertime for them, that could potentially still help. Because, yeah, off the record.
The only issue with that is you aren't going to get credit for your work. I know in the animation industry there are actual like rules about credits and properly crediting people. So that's kind of a moral standpoint you're going to have to take is whether or not you care about getting proper credit for your work. Since credits are now being generalized and since you'd probably be quoted as extra help, they probably may not include your name as a result.
I'd say your best bet is to look out for indie films or ones that are going indie. Like I know Monochrome just went indie, and I'm even on Seven Lives. Like just keep an eye out because those it does not matter, and you can work a lot more.
Yeah, I've applied to a couple that are indie, and I have a couple of friends that are in animation that have decided to go indie. And illustration doesn't have like a capstone in a sense, right?
There is rumors. So Nelson is looking into making like a game or animation capstone for illustration that would, in theory, bring in like ITGM or Anim students and, allow for other majors to come in and, get their hands in it. Right now it's only in the planning phase, nothing is set in stone. I just know that's something that she's looking at doing, but that's a whole can of worms because that messes with credit hours, that messes with classes they offer, career track for, major credits and all that. So there's a lot of stuff they still have to figure out about it, so I would not get your hopes up about that.
Yeah, and like off the record, like it's definitely not happening because there's so many surface design and children's illustration book people coming in that if we did like it's really unlikely they might be able to find one capstone that would include all the concentrations in illustration, especially as they continue to diversify. It sucks for us.
Yeah. Basically, SCAD sucks right now. Off the record.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
why I'm trying to graduate early.
it's still being recorded.
Dang, I just started.
Okay, if
Sorry,
we
Pia.
do we have any more questions before the recording ends? I'll take that as a no.